It's week 5. That means we're now in the second half of this Prismatic Draft League season. It's been a crazy season so far with all kinds of sword and shield strategies that just don't match what you see in VGC these days as we're playing different games most of the time. It's been a lot of fun to go back to sword and shield, and it's been a lot of fun to see what kinds of crazy techs people come up with, and I think there's going to be more of that as we head into the second half of the season right now. Couple steps before the replays, as always. First, here are the standings as of the end of week 4. This is exactly the same table that featured in Monday's video, and if you watched Monday's video, you know a couple of things. One, you know that there was an error in the standings tables last week that I'm pretty sure I have now corrected, so this should be exactly what the standings actually look like halfway through the season. And of course, you also know the outcome of the ones that we won't be covering here between the Toronto Rock Slide and the East Coast Esper. It was a fun one. Please do go check it out if you haven't. The Esper, of course, sitting in first place in the league in this here table, entirely undefeated in both sets and games in the whole first half of the season. And they're not even the only ones. Team Staff United, also undefeated up to this point. The Ontario Oguris, undefeated in sets, though they have lost a couple of games. So a few teams threatening to potentially run away with it this season. You already have seen, if you watched Monday's video, how things turned out for the Esper, but we'll see what kind of pace the Staff United and the Oguris continue to set. There also, of course, are a few other teams high up in the standings. Pendragon United and the Azure Bay Chatots have taken a couple of losses, but are still in very strong positions heading into the late stages of the playoff race. And then the Toronto Rock Slide, before this week's result, at 2-2 with the best differential of those teams so far, in a decent spot, but still needing to keep pace, as any of the Dreamyard Darkrais, Bashful Bisharps, Elegancy, the cooler Dreamyard Darkrais, even anyone below them really, could still make a late charge up the standings. There are a couple of trades this week. First, this team here is the cooler Dreamyard Darkrais, and by the way, thank you so much to that coach for clarifying exactly how you want me to say the name of your team. They've gotten a new logo. It's, well, let's not dwell on it too much. And they also have dropped Wobbuffet and picked up Absols. I think Absols probably does two main things for this team. Number one, they just seem to want to troll the Alaskan Absols after, I guess, already trolling the Dreamyard Darkrais. We kind of have a villain for the rest of this season, I suppose, and they are playing into the role to the extent that they can. I'm not really sure how effective a troll job it is when the Absols had an entire half of the season to draft or pick up Absols, and they never did. But this is what's happening here. And number two, Absols does give them another Perish Song user that they can run in their Perish Trap mode with Gothitelle. Last week we saw Azumarill running both Belly Drum and Perish Song. But if they want a little bit more flexibility, if they want to run, say, Belly Drum Azumarill without forcing Perish Song onto it, or they want Choice Band Azumarill or Assault Vest, they have another Perish Trap option now with the Absols. Absols is also just like, it's not super strong, but it's a pretty reasonable Dark type physical attacker. That said, they do have Scrafty already. They do have Darkrai as a Dark type special attacker. I think Absols, again, is here mainly just to troll and maybe to click Perish Song sometimes, but we'll find out. As for Wobbuffet, I think they were probably just not doing anything with Wobbuffet. They have a stronger trapper now in Gothitelle. Wobbuffet would give them a second shadow tag, but I don't think they really need it. And as much fun as it was when this team was the grounded punching bags to watch Wobbuffet try to catch things with Mirror Coat and counter early on in the season, it's a really difficult Pokemon to make work. And clearly, this team has moved on to other gimmicks since the coaching change. Then, of course, the other trade for this week is the East Coast Esper dropping Hitmontop for Latios. We talked about this one in Monday's video already. They do lose a lot of the support tech that Hitmontop provides, but they weren't really making the most of that regardless, even when they had Scrafty on this team for most of the season so far instead of Hitmontop. And Latios gives them yet another massively threatening Pokemon, so they now have several of those that they can build around. And they, in a way, they took a fast special attacking legendary Pokemon in Spectre, turned it into Dracozolt, which gives them a whole other dangerous mode with a hard-hitting physical electric type with Hippowdon setting up the sand for it. And then at the end of all their transactions, they still had that fast special attacking legendary Pokemon, now in Latios, which brings that dragon typing with its defensive matchup spread, as well as some support options. You can even go physical, run like Dragon Dance or something with it. Point is, as I talked about on Monday, between Colossal, Rillaboom, Primarina, Latios, Dracozolt, Alola, Marowak, Braviary, those are the main ones, but that's also a majority of their whole roster. They have a lot of threatening Pokemon that they can build around week by week, which means it's very hard to counter team this matchup because there's so many different things that they can throw at you. And if one game plan fails, they might well have another waiting in the back. So they've just made their team that much stronger across the full sum of the trades that they've made recently, including the Dracozolt one and the Latios one. Trades are slowing down a little bit, as of course there were some big ones last week, but the trade deadline has not arrived yet. We'll see if there are some late shakeups this season, but for this week, that's it, and it's time now to go to the replays. This week we begin with the Nothing Burger taking on Pendragon United. So we got Galarian Weezing, Runeriga, Slowbro, Azurill, Mew, and Ditto for the Nothing Burger. No Silvally this week, but still a couple of very chaotic, unpredictable Pokemon, and of course the Trick Room core with Runerigus and Slowbro. It'll be interesting to see what Azurill does if it comes to a game. I'm a little bit stumped, and of course Galarian Weezing actually could be very strong against Pendragon United because they do use the Sun to boost some of their abilities a good bit, right? Between the Solar Power on the Charizard and the Chlorophyll and the Exeggutor. Both of those Pokemon do kind of rely, and Ninetales setting Drought with its ability in the first place. That part of the team kind of relies on abilities a fair bit, although in this matchup, the Exeggutor probably doesn't really want Chlorophyll because it looks very likely that the Nothing Burger will set Trick Room, and even if they fail to do that, Exeggutor probably outspeeds a lot of what they've brought. And the Charizard should be able to hit hard and get good wildfire damage even without the Sun. So Galarian Weezing can be a little bit disruptive to Pendragon United, but I'm not sure it really matters as much in this matchup as you might think. Stopping Scraggy Intimidate into Runerigus is not bad, though. On the Pendragon United side, they do have that Sun Core. They might well try to overwhelm Runerigus and Slowbro before Trick Room goes up. Exeggutor should actually be very well positioned without even caring that much about Chlorophyll into a lot of this team, along with it also having the Psychic Stab to threaten the Galarian Weezing. Be interesting to see if there's like a random bug type attack on Mew to deal with the Exeggutor, because otherwise I could actually see it causing a lot of trouble for this team. Pheromosa is interesting here. It has ways to threaten Runerigus and Slowbro, but is extremely vulnerable if Trick Room goes up, but very overwhelmingly strong here if it doesn't, with the Bug Stab into Slowbro and the Ice Coverage into Runerigus. Charizard just hits massively hard. We could see it running Solar Beam to cover for the Trick Room duo. I don't know what Ribombee brings to the table here, but yeah, it kind of just looks like overwhelming Sun offense from Pendragon United, and the Nothing Burger, I mean, the Mew probably has some tricks up its sleeve. We just don't know exactly what they are yet. The Ditto makes things a little bit interesting because it can copy a strong attacker like Charizard or Pheromosa, but otherwise the Nothing Burger look like they really want that Trick Room up, and we'll see. Well, there have been a lot of matchups this season where Trick Room was very important to determining how they played out. This looks like it could be another one, but we'll just have to jump in and find out. Weezing leads with Slowbro against Exeggutor and Scraggy. We got some stuff in the chat already. Not important, though. Okay. Exeggutor and Scraggy. So Exeggutor, like I said, does look like a giant threat here. And it's probably a good idea to scope out what answers the Nothing Burger has to it. Scraggy is interesting. Of course, it can apply some fake-out pressure. It could intimidate a Runerigus or like a physical attacking Mew if they brought that. Of course, not with Weezing on the field. It can't. Slowbro protects. Exeggutor goes straight for a Psychic into Weezing and narrowly misses the KO. I don't think that special defense drop is going to end up mattering, but good to know that Weezing does survive that. We see Taunt into the Slowbro from Scraggy, so that'll shut down a Trick Room unless the Slowbro has a Mental Herb, but we don't find out this turn since it protected, and Weezing fires a Flamethrower back into Exeggutor, doing a decent chunk of damage, but less than half. Black Sludge on the Weezing, not really surprising. We see it protect this turn as Exeggutor goes for a Leaf Storm, maybe trying to catch Runerigus or something switching in. The Taunt does go into Slowbro this turn, but there is no Trick Room. Slowbro just clicks Ice Beam immediately into Exeggutor with a critical hit that I'm not confident matters, and knocks it out. Ninetales comes in, no Sun, of course, until it knocks out the Weezing with an Overheat, and then the Sun does go up, and we get the Intimidate into Slowbro. Don't think that matters much. It is Eject Pack Ninetales, so its own Overheat drop causes it to switch out, and now Charizard is here. There's no Trick Room on the field. Slowbro is taunted, so there's not about to be Trick Room. Charizard looks like it's ready to go crazy. It does also have the Solar Power online since Weezing has been knocked out. Scraggy goes for Snarl into Slowbro. That'll weaken whatever attack is coming out here. It's Scald into Charizard. Of course, it cannot burn a fire type, and also it is weakened by the Sun, and Slowbro's at -1 special attack, so it does some chip, but not a whole lot. Charizard takes a decent bit more from the Solar Power, actually. Ditto switches in, but it switches, or well, it comes in after the KO, but that means it comes in on the Scraggy slot, and so it turns into a Scraggy and not a Charizard. That might still be threatening, but again, if Charizard Gigantamaxes, as we've covered many weeks now, it cannot be flinched by a Fake Out. Maybe there's a Snarl coming out, but I don't know how well Ditto takes a G-Max Wildfire if that's what they go for. Slowbro's still taunted, it still can't set Trick Room. G-Max Wildfire crits, we don't really get to see how well Scraggy takes it. Ditto as Scraggy takes it. We get another Snarl into Slowbro. This Scald is really not going to do much. It does 5% to Scraggy. It does get the burn. Charizard is being worn down more by its own solar power and, yeah, just the solar power than anything else. Mew comes in and Dynamaxes. It could have, like, a rock move. I mean, Mew could have any type of attack, right? But Charizard's faster than anything here. I believe Mew does have higher base speed than Charizard. Is that right? No, they're actually the same base speed. So it could be a speed tie if this is a fast Mew. But in any case, Charizard moves first. Knocks out Slowbro with a max overgrowth. It does have a Life Orb as well. Okay, I thought I saw that earlier, and then I wasn't sure for some reason. The log got me confused. So yeah, Charizard got worn down a fair bit by its own Life Orb and Solar Power. But it does get another KO here before it is in fact knocked out by a max Rock Fall from Mew. But Mew is now alone. We'll see if it can pull this one back. It gets taunted, but I think it needs to be attacking now anyway. As Ninetales, of course, will be the last Pokemon for Pendragon United. I mean, Mew is here. They only have 2 Pokemon left. Mew is Dynamaxed. I think it's totally plausible that Mew pulls this one back, but let's see. The sun is back up. Will-O-Wisp misses into Mew. Max Rockfall doesn't get the KO. Ninetales only with a single weakness, not the double. Foul Play doesn't do much to Mew. I believe Mew has one more turn of Dynamax. There's a whole bunch of end-of-turn effects happen here. Mew now is burned. Synchronize would bounce the burn back, but Ninetales as a fire type is immune. Not bounce it back, it would copy the burn on the opposing Pokemon so that they're both burned. Ninetales drops to one more Max Rockfall, but Mew's Dynamax will wear off now. It is just Mew versus Scraggy. We've only seen that Mew has a rock type attack. I think there's a good chance that Mew is a physical attacker, and it is now burned. Scraggy will protect. We actually see an Ice Beam from the Mew. So maybe it's special Mew, maybe the burn doesn't weaken its damage, but if Ice Beam is the best coverage it has for Scraggy, I'm not sure that's enough. Scraggy will surely have an Eviolite. It can't be frozen because it's already burned. Funny how it benefits from that there. Mew takes some chip from a Snarl. I mean, Scraggy is getting worn down though, but Mew is going to take sand damage and burn damage now. We know the Scraggy can protect. It doesn't this turn, but it survives another Ice Beam, gets another Snarl. And it just has to protect now, and Mew will drop to burn damage. Close game in the end. Despite the Charizard going kind of nuts in the middle there. But Scraggy, as it says in the chat there, absolutely clutches up against Mew of all things, staring down the original mythical Pokemon. This one little Scraggy just refused to drop, and so Pendragon United, off the strength of this absolute powerhouse, takes a 1-0 lead in the set, and we'll see what adjustments the Nothing Burger have to try to get a better result here in Game 2. Runerigus leads with Azurill, so we will see the Azurill after all against Scraggy and Ribombee. Sorry, just got distracted a little bit seeing if there's anything worth noting in the chat, but it just says matchup of the century, which, hey, is bearing out so far. Scraggy and Ribombee this time, so once again, we'll see whether the Nothing Burger can remove the Scraggy. This fairy type here might actually be the key to that. Let's find out. We do get the Intimidate immediately because there's no Wheezing on the field. Runerigus Dynamaxes immediately. We see the side Aqua Jet from Azurill. That is very weak coming from a baby Pokemon, not even with Stab, because Azurill, unlike its evolved forms, is not a water type. And the Runerigus does only get to +1 attack, though, because it's been intimidated. The Scraggy could, in theory, pivot out and intimidate it again and get rid of that boost, but it's still something to work with for now. Ribombee sets a Reflect. Foul Play from the Scraggy does a lot to the +1 attack Runerigus, so that might be backfiring a little bit on the Nothing Burger. As Max Rockfall comes out, does not one-shot the Ribombee through Protect. The sand damage, of course, is going to be adding up, though. We see Helping Hand from Azurill. We see Light Screen from Ribombee. Another Foul Play, almost but not quite, KOs the Runerigus. People are really having fun in the chat with this one, and I cannot blame them. Apparently, Wandering Spirit doesn't trigger if either mod is Dynamaxed. That's good to know. I definitely would not have known that interaction. Colossal at home is pretty funny, but to be honest, this is not as strong as Colossal. Yeah, okay. I didn't even think about Wandering Spirit, but we do have our explanation there in the chat. Apparently Dynamax shuts that down. Max Phantasm into... What did that go into? Into the Scraggy. Okay, yeah, no wonder it didn't do very much damage. That is resisted by that dark type. We get Azurill now going for an Aqua Jet to knock out the Ribombee, but Scraggy foul play knocks out the Runerigus. Runerigus actually never getting a KO by itself. Azurill finished off the Ribombee there. Probably the Nothing Burger getting less out of their Dynamax than they'd like. And now the Giant Threat Exeggutor is here behind screens. The Dynamax already used up. Weezing is here. We know it takes a Psychic, but maybe it doesn't take a Max Mindstorm. Exeggutor Dynamaxes. Azurill gives Weezing a helping hand, but yeah, Weezing is just wiped out by that Max move. And that's really funny because the neutralizing gas fades when Weezing is knocked out. Intimidate activates a second time, so Azurill now dropped to -2 attack and taunted. So all it has available probably is -2 Aqua Jet now. Mew is once again the last Pokemon for the Nothing Burger. This time it can't Dynamax as Scraggy switches out. Ninetales sets up the Sun. Aqua Jet does actually nothing to Ninetales because I even forgot Psychic Terrain is still up as well. So the -2 Aqua Jet in Psychic Terrain, not doing damage to anything unless they brought the Charizard, which we know at this point that they didn't. Max Overgrowth from the Exeggutor does a lot of damage to Mew. It does set up Grassy Terrain, so now the Aqua Jet will work. Exeggutor tanks that Ice Beam pretty nicely behind the light screen, and Dynamax. Aqua Jet does 2% to Ninetales. Pretty underwhelming damage as Exeggutor knocks out Mew with a Max Overgrowth. And Ninetales knocks out Azurill with an Overheat. Azurill hanging on until the end there, but not quite able to close this one out. So what is Wandering Spirit? It's sort of like Mummy that Cofagrigus has. Wandering Spirit, I think, when there's contact, trades the abilities, right? Instead of overwriting the opponent's ability. Oh, it's Huge Power Azurill, and it's supposed to give Huge Power to Runerigus with the Aqua Jet. That's why Azurill is the side Aqua Jet user. Wow, that is a really cool tech. I didn't think of that at all when they made the trade. I just said, yeah, I don't know why they made this trade, and moved on. But wait, Azurill really brings something to the table with that combination, except now we know apparently they can't Dynamax the Runerigus first if they want to pull it off. I didn't even stop and think this one through until the game was over. But if that just worked the way they intended, that would be a super fun tech. And I would think Azurill is so weak, the Aqua Jet is so weak, they could still pull it off situationally if they can get away with not Dynamaxing the Runerigus on the first turn. So we may yet see that cause some trouble later. That's so cool, though. I kind of wish it had worked. In any case, yeah, you go ahead and yell at Game Freak, but despite the amazing strategy from the Nothing Burger that will be a lot of fun to see if they successfully pull it off in a later week. Pendragon United do actually take this one fairly comfortably in Game 2. Game 1 did go down to the wire. The Mew only had Ice Beam to hit a lot of the threats on this team, and without Stab, it's just not quite strong enough through screens or into a neutral Eviolite Pokemon like Scraggy. The Scraggy is the biggest story here in Game 1, but I do think the Trick Room also mattered quite a bit. The Nothing Burger never set Trick Room up, never even really seemed to try, and the speed advantage from Pendragon United made a pretty significant difference as well. But the Runerigus tech just not quite hitting in Game 2 definitely sealed it. It's crazy that was the first set to go through this video. I don't even know what we're going to see the rest of the way, but I feel like we could have easily ended on that one. However, up next we have Ryangreenblue taking on these Urbe Chatots. The Chatots have left their Sand mode behind this time, so it's they do have Dracovish, maybe with Strong Jaw this week, boosting that Fishious Rend even more, and probably with Articuno setting up Tailwind so that it can still move before its opponents. Although actually, Ryangreenblue is the hard Trick Room team this season. The most hard Trick Room of all, and so they probably just didn't bring the Sand because they don't need to worry that much about Dracovish's speed control. In fact, looking at the matchup, the Articuno might be less interested in Tailwind, more interested in Imprison, sealing the opponent's Trick Room, so that Dracovish can go first and go crazy with probably Strong Jaw boosted Fishious Rend. They do have a lot of the good stuff, Fairy Dragon Steel Core with Genesect, Clefable, and Komodo. This time Genesect has no particular drive, it has a different item. It does not have one of its Technoblast type changing items, I think. Just a few solid, strong game plans that they can throw at the opponent. I definitely think Imprison, Trick Room, Articuno is likely. I think they don't want to let the Trick Room go up if they can avoid it. But then the Double 8 also could be very threatening into Pokemon like Magearna, Stack Attack on Conkeldurr, just relatively hard for those to remove. Tanky with an Eviolite, hitting back reasonably hard. Does have to watch out a little bit for the Golurk. and just the special attackers. But it shuts down, potentially shuts down, certainly threatens a lot of the strongest Pokemon on the other side. And Ryangreenblue, they've brought their hard Trick Room stuff. That's everything about this team says hard Trick Room. The Melodic least of all, but we've seen the Melodic put in work in past matchups. Let's just see what we got here. Melodic is good as a defensive backbone if the Trick Room attackers don't pan out. We do see Articuno leading, I think probably wanting to click Imprison next to Clefable. Clefable is very vulnerable against these two Steel types, so I wouldn't be surprised if it switches out, but it does also have the Follow Me option to protect Articuno. We see Magearna and Stack Attack on the other side, two very strong Trick Room setters with nicknames that make you question which one will actually be clicking the move, as both of them are very strong Trick Room attackers as well. We also see Stack Attack on an Air Balloon, which would help it against, I don't know what. I mean, ground moves in general, but I don't think there are any ground moves, unless Dracovish has one. On the Chatots side this week, certainly not going to help it take a Vicious Rend. Follow Me from Clefable, Imprison from Articuno. No real surprises there, as Magearna sets Light Screen, and Stack Attack goes for Trick Room, but doesn't, of course, manage to pull it off. Articuno now Dynamaxes. That's an interesting use of Dynamax, but of course it does help them to keep Articuno on the field for as long as they can, which is important with the Trick Room tech, but we'll see what else it has going for it. It doesn't have a lot... Articuno, I think, Galarian Articuno, I think, doesn't have a lot of coverage outside of Psychic and Flying, neither of which seems very useful here, but they might well have cooked something up. Okay, it is Max Phantasm off of Shadow Ball. Is that really what it did? Hang on. Max Phantasm off of Shadow Ball, I assume. That does like nothing to that Magearna. It does lower defenses. Magearna going for Calm Mind, setting up. Looking like a giant threat, actually, even outside of Trick Room, because there's nothing on the field that directly threatens it very much, considering what that Max Phantasm does. And they have a lot of incentive to not switch the Articuno out. Clefable has an eject button. Okay, that explains the Follow Me play a little bit more. The Clefable is supposed to give cover for Articuno to Imprison and Dynamax, and then they get something threatening like Dracovish in from the opponent hitting Clefable and forcing it out. That doesn't happen until turn 2 here, but it's still not too bad for the Chatots. Dracovish is in, there's no Reflect, there is a Light Screen. Magearna Dynamaxes, Max Phantasm goes into Stack Attack at this time, still doesn't do much. But Max Phantasm, Articuno doesn't need to do much damage if it gets defense drops that enable Dracovish to just go crazy on top of the Vicious Rend, first move boost, and probably Strong Jaw. Maybe even a Choice Band or something, we'll find out. Vicious Rend goes into Magearna and just knocks it out, making Magearna's Dynamax useless in this game. Stack Attack does land a Stone Edge into Articuno, does a lot of damage. Articuno recovers some with a Citrus Berry, but is still in range of another Stone Edge. However, there's no way Stack Attack is standing up to a Vicious Rend. Conkeldurr comes in, it could Mach Punch or something. It goes for Detect first, it gets the tiniest bit of chip from the Max Phantasm, but the defense drops keep stacking up. This is the last turn of the Dynamax, though. Vicious Rend goes into Conkeldurr. That means the Stack Attack is free to click Stone Edge again, and it does, but it misses. Conkeldurr gets burned by its Flame Orb. Dynamax over for the Chatots. Articuno just protecting, just trying to stay on the field as long as possible, and Conkeldurr just gets wiped out by a Vicious Rend. If it had Mach Punch, I believe that would also make the Vicious Rend weaker, right? Because Dracovish wouldn't be moving first anymore. Although into -1 defense with all the other boosts we can guess it probably has. I'm not sure how much that matters, but yeah, I'm thinking that Conkeldurr probably doesn't have Mach Punch if it didn't click it either one of those turns. Stone Edge lands into Dracovish, does a bit more than half. Golurk is here. Shadow Ball chips that down pretty nicely. The Vicious Rend goes into Golurk. Chatots not respecting the Stack Attack at this point, and fair enough, as once again it lands a Stone Edge the first time into a target, but it misses the second one. That's happened against both Articuno and Dracovish now, and I believe this is -3 defense Stack Attack. Articuno protects for good measure as Vicious Rend just wipes it out. And the Chatots played exactly the way this looked to me at preview, pretty much, with the Articuno setting up Imprison and staying on the field the whole time, the Clefable enabling it to set that up in the first place, and then the Dracovish just sweeping. And the one thing I did sleep on was the synergy of Articuno Dynamaxing to make itself harder to knock out, and then using Max Phantasm to lower opponents' defense stats for the Dracovish to hit that much harder with Vicious Rend. That was a very cool tech. Worked like a charm in Game 1. I do think we'll probably see the Melodic in Game 2, because that's a lot harder for the Dracovish to knock out. And, well, I don't know about a lot harder, but it is harder. And it also, if it has competitive, will be boosted in a special attack by Max Phantasm. So I don't know that the Chatots can pull off exactly the same thing twice in a row, but let's find out. Magearna leads with Melodic. There it is. against Genesect and Articuno. Genesect here, looking like a little bit more of an offensive threat than the Clefable was, but presumably still trying to create openings for the Articuno to do its thing. Articuno actually, or no, Genesect actually goes for Ally Switch turn 1. Okay, so that kind of functions like Follow Me. A little bit more dependent on the opponent's decisions, but kind of try to make Genesect the target turn 1 so that Articuno can get the Imprison up for free, and then it'll probably Dynamax again. Melodic setting up with Coil, though. That'll, if they go for the Max Phantasm stuff again, that'll offset the drops while it also gets competitive boosts, although I think it probably won't be the Max Phantasm stuff this time. The Melodic is pretty hard for that to deal with, and also the Genesect, we still don't know about a set, except that it has Ally Switch, a move that I didn't even know it could learn. Magearna also setting up with Calm Mind. Articuno does Dynamax on turn 2 once again. We get a Light Screen from the Genesect? I'm learning a lot about Genesect's move pool. As we actually do get a Max Phantasm into Melodic. Okay. Does about the same damage that it would to Magearna. And Hypnosis from Melodic back into Articuno. Makes sense. Accuracy boosted by the Coil. I guess it's also not competitive Melodic, because it didn't get a special attack boost. Probably has Marvel Scale then. We also see it's Red Card Melodic, meant to force out anything that attacks it. I don't know exactly what that was for, but something like Boosted Komodo or even Swords Dance Doublade could be gotten the better of by that tech. However, I didn't remember this. I'm relearning this right now, but we see that Red Card doesn't work if the target is Dynamaxed, so it's used up, but it didn't actually force the Articuno out. But Articuno being asleep, still not going to be able to make the most of what's left of his Dynamax turns. We see U-turn on the Genesect. Once again, makes a lot of sense when the Articuno is lowering defense stats. That U-turn is going to do a lot of damage into most targets. It does a fair bit into Melodic here. And we see Dracovish come in once again. Articuno staying asleep as Dracovish now takes a nap. Melodic moving before Dracovish. That's got to be a pretty fast Melodic. Dracovish taking a nap as well. Ryangreenblue getting some good openings here to... well, it can't set the Trick Room as long as Articuno is still on the field, but to build some kind of offensive momentum. The Magearna is still in a tricky spot because it can set up with Calm Mind, but it's at -1 defense. They do have screens up. But the Dracovish still is a giant threat if and when it wakes up, as long as Trick Room is not on the field. But they might be able to just... they might get enough time to knock out the Articuno and work from there. We'll see what happens. Melodic recovers. And is just another Calm Mind from Magearna. Gets played patiently through the Dynamax, which does now wear off. Both Pokemon stay asleep on the other side. Melodic going for another Coil as Magearna throws off a Dazzling Gleam, and that just knocks out Dracovish. Articuno's still here, but... so there's still no Trick Room going up, but the giant threat Dracovish is gone. Magearna gets a Soul Heart boost as well. Articuno wakes up and just goes for Protect. Once again, just trying to stay on the field while it can. But Komodo Flamethrower into +2 special defense Magearna through a Light Screen does pretty unimpressive damage. As Komodo gets hit by the +2 accuracy Hypnosis, takes a nap, and then gets wiped out by +3 Dazzling Gleam even through its Roselli Berry. Magearna gets another Soul Heart boost, gets to +4. It's just Genesect and Articuno remaining here. Genesect Flamethrower does some more damage to Magearna, but still not as much as they'd like to see, as Articuno Shadow Ball is not doing much to Melodic either. Articuno goes back to sleep. Dazzling Gleam knocks out Articuno, does a lot of damage to Genesect, and there's just no way that Genesect can pull this one back, as the Flamethrower still doesn't KO Magearna, even with the screens gone, and Magearna knocks it out back with a Dazzling Gleam. So, I did say the Melodic could be an adjustment that would disrupt the Chatots game plan. It worked way better than I anticipated, setting up with Coil and then landing Hypnosis over and over. And again, the downside for the Chatots, it's a really cool game plan that they brought this week. It worked like a charm in Game 1. The one downside is that Articuno doesn't have the most threatening presence in itself. So, committing their Dynamax to that, and having it sit in one of their 2 slots on the field for as long as possible does to some extent reduce the offensive pressure that they're able to put out against their opponent. I do think the Genesect, under different circumstances, could have made up for that. Having both Genesect and Dracovish available in the other slot means that there is a lot of pressure still coming from there, but it does ultimately kind of rely on the Dracovish still to do a lot of work, and it fell a bit short here in Game 2. Let's see whether they have some other way to play this in Game 3 or whether they can get that game plan back on track with some adjustments. But they do need something for the Melodic here. Let's find out. Magearna and Melodic once again. He had Drakefish and Clefable this time. No Articuno on the field immediately. Let's also give the Magearna credit. Setting up with Calm Mind made it just too difficult to remove with the Chatots Pokemon asleep so often in Game 2, and also just with that special bulk. But yeah, they're just going for it immediately with the Dracovish here. No Articuno on the field. It's Helping Hand. Is it Vicious Rend into Melodic? It is, and it one-shots. Yeah, Dracovish is just so powerful. They certainly have that kind of adjustment available to them if they need it. Magearna sets Reflect, but once again, there is no Trick Room on the field. There was an opening if Magearna has the move, although I don't think it does, right? It has Reflect, Light Screen. I've already closed the other tabs, but Reflect, Light Screen, Dazzling Gleam, and Calm Mind. So Stack Attack is in now. I think Stack Attack knows... We know that Stack Attack knows Trick Room. I think we know that Magearna doesn't. It might be a little too slow to set that up. The Dracovish is just going to go crazy with Helping Hand boosted Vicious Rend. It takes out Magearna here. That does give Stack Attack an opening to set Trick Room. We get Golurk here. Stack Attack of Dynamaxes. Clefable goes for Follow Me, though, so it'll take a Max Steel Spike. Just kidding, it gets one-shot by the Max Steel Spike. But what I mean is... Well, okay. What I mean is it gives Dracovish an opening to attack even in Trick Room. That said, the Steel Spike defense boost affects both of these Pokemon, and Stack Attacker with Beast Boost gets another one into defense. So there's +2 defense, Dynamax, Stack Attacker. Golurk gets to attack Dracovish. High Horsepower does a lot, but doesn't KO. And Vicious Rend doesn't KO back. There's a real difference when Dracovish is not moving first. We see Doublade come in. It could Shadow Sneak the Golurk. They still have to beat the Stack Attacker somehow. I mean, they could have Sacred Sword on Doublade. That of course Stack Attack has a double weakness to that, and it ignores the defense boost. So Doublade might be able to clutch it up here, and that might be having Doublade in the back might explain how some of why the Chatots played the way they did. A few times now they've targeted. I've guessed wrong as to what Pokemon they were going to target, but I guess if you remove the Magearna as a giant threat that's already starting to set up. If you have this and you know that it can beat the Stack Attacker, you're good, but let's see if it actually plays out that way. Max Steel Spike doesn't quite KO the Dracovish, does get another defense boost. We see Max Knuckle from the Doublade. Max Knuckle does not ignore defense boosts, unlike... It does confirm that the Doublade knows Sacred Sword, which outside of Dynamax will ignore the boost, but Knuckle itself does not. But it does give an attack boost to Dracovish. Will it get to use that boost? Also pops the air balloon. Yes, Golurk goes for high horsepower into Doublade, not doing a whole lot, as Doublade is Dynamaxed, so it's just able to take the attack that much better. And Dracovish Vicious Rend, +1 attack, into +3 defense. Not moving first, doesn't matter, crits, knocks out the Stack Attacker, and that'll be GG. Max Phantasm from Doublade finishes the job. And the Azure Bay Chatots, this was a good set. This was a good demonstration of one team's game plan worked exactly right in Game 1, and then they traded adjustments back and forth. Really solid adjustments from Ryangreenblue in Game 2, but the Chatots saving the Doublade for Game 3, seeing that Dynamax and stand up to Golurk and Stack Attacker, and also having some good luck with the crit with the Vicious Rend on Stack Attacker, which I think would have done a lot less damage without that crit. They're able to pull this one out. Of course, we never saw their last Pokemon in Game 2 either. It probably wasn't the Articuno, the way they were playing this. They probably did have some trouble with the Articuno being too passive, and decide, partly for that reason as well, to take a different approach. But the Doublade being able to go crazy in Trick Room meant that they had that flexibility. Just a solid set all around, a lot of fun to watch. Up next, the Alaskan Absols take on the team that's been trolling them this week, the cooler Dreamyard Darkrais. The Absols do have a substitute coach this week. Shadow was unavailable, and both sides decided that they would rather have someone else play in his stead than just call it a forfeit. And there's no Gyarados and no Salamence this week. The Double is here. I don't know what it's going to do. I don't know what Double does, except I'm pretty sure it can baton pass Cotton Guards. I think Double probably gets Body Press, so that might be good into all these Dark types. But in any case, we got some strong, bulky attackers like Goodra Tapu Bulu, Magnezone, Arcanine. We got that single striker Shifu. I don't know what the game plans are here. I don't know what those Pokemon individually are going to do. We'll just have to jump in and find out. After we acknowledge that the cooler Dreamyard Darkrais have brought the duo of Sigilyph and Darkrai so they can set up Gravity and get that accuracy boosted Dark Void. They do have Absol and Gothitelle. Perish Trap is a real possibility here. They do have the Scraggy to intimidate the strong physical attackers on the other side and throw off fake outs and stuff, creating openings for a Darkrai mode or a Perish mode, or, like we saw last week, a Spectrier setup offense mode, outspeeding and powering through everything that this team throws at them. Except in this case, probably not everything, because Single Striker Shifu with Sucker Punch is very threatening to Spectrier, and of course Double is immune to Shadow Ball, so that's something that it brings to the table right off the bat. Anyway, let's see what happens. Sigilyph leads with Scrafty. Okay, no Darkrai with the Sigilyph so far against their Shifu and Arcanine. We do see Intimidate on the Arcanine. It activates an Adrenaline Orb on the Sigilyph, boosting its speed. That's a pretty cool attack from the cooler Dreamyard Darkrais, as there are, of course, a lot of Pokemon with Intimidate on the Absols roster, and I think every week we've seen at least one of them actually bring Intimidate, this week being no exception. So it's not guaranteed, of course, but there are a lot of opportunities in this matchup for the Sigilyph to get a boost, and then it can outspeed its... It can comfortably outspeed its partner Darkrai and most other things here, and get that Gravity set up no problem. So I like the Adrenaline Orb bring. That's a pretty clever idea there. Urshifu switches out immediately to Magnezone, as Sigilyph does set the Gravity before taking Snarl. Scrafty is not going to care about the Snarl, though. It just throws a close combat into Urshifu, catches Magnezone switching in. Magnezone now going for an ally switch, so that Arcanine will now take the close combat as Sigilyph sets Tailwind. The close combat does crit, so Arcanine is almost knocked out, but not quite, as it gets a burn into Scraggy with Will-O-Wisp. Darkrai now switches in for Sigilyph, and Horsemanless Horse, that's a funny nickname, Spectrier for Scrafty, so we see all four Pokemon from the cooler Dreamyard Darkrais already. Arcanine looks to hit Scrafty with an extreme speed, instead catches the Spectrier, so that's immune, there's no damage there. Darkrai will now be able to take full advantage. Well, no, actually, they switched in this turn. And they won't quite take full advantage of the Tailwind, as the Electro Web hits both targets, doing some pretty good chip to both and lowering their speed. That said, with Tailwind, they still have the speed advantage. Extreme Speed does not a lot of damage to Darkrai, but Spectrier just goes straight for a Nasty Plot as Darkrai goes for Dark Void. It hits the Arcanine, but we see that Arcanine has a Chesto Berry, so Arcanine will wake up immediately for now. Darkrai will have to hit 2 Dark Voids to actually put this Pokemon to sleep, and at that point the risk of missing gets a little bit more serious. But it also misses the Magnezone, and that means Magnezone will get a chance to move this turn and maybe hit the Spectrier. Of course, the Magnezone also could have a Lum Berry, we don't know. The Arcanine had a Chesto Berry, which is the berry specifically for sleep. Item Clause means you can't have multiple Chesto Berries on the team, but Lum Berry, which cures any status condition, could also be on the team somewhere, and I don't know where it could be. It's just as likely Magnezone as anything else in my eyes. Magnezone, though, does just go for another Electro Web, and actually, considering that that's doing a lot of damage, maybe I should entertain the idea that it specs Magnezone. I don't know. We all know on this channel I don't have much of an internal damage calculator. It doesn't knock anything out, but these Pokemon are pretty chipped down now. They're at -2 speed. That'll just negate the Tailwind. They should still be faster as long as the Tailwind is still up, but that's only one more turn. Darkrai switches out, I assume to reset the drops. We see another ally switch from the Magnezone, and Spectrier goes for Mud Shot into the Magnezone, hitting Arcanine instead and knocking it out. That means the ally switch is the only move that comes out from the Absols this turn. Mud Shot, actually a really funny tech on the Spectre. Actually, I think Spectre probably did run Mud Shot in Sword and Shield VGC, to the extent that Spectre got any significant use, because Spectre doesn't have very much coverage. Mud Shot gives it an option for a ground-type attack. It doesn't get Earth Power. Mud Shot is the best it's got. I think it's like 65 base power, but that's still pretty strong when you turn it into a Max Quake. And in the meantime, it does give them a bit more speed control with the guaranteed speed drop if Mud Shot connects with a target. So I actually think Mud Shot Spectre probably was a thing. I think I vaguely remember that. And we see it here, knocking out the Arcanine. Getting a Grim Neigh boost, it's a +3 special attack. That's the other thing, at +2 or +3, that 65 base power is not quite so bad anymore. And the Absols are under a lot of pressure so far. Gravity is over, but Sigilif is still in the back. Its Adrenaline Orb is used up. It won't get the boost anymore. Darkrais still in the back. If they get Gravity back up, they can keep clicking that Dark Void. They have a pretty clear speed advantage just in the overall roster matchup, and it's shone through in this game so far. But now Goodra is here, hitting the field for the first time. There is also still this Single Striker Shifu that switched out turn 1, and we haven't seen any of what it can do yet. So this is definitely not sewn up for the cooler Dreamyard Darkrais, but the Absols have looked like they're under a lot of pressure so far. That said, Goodra will Dynamax here and avoid being flinched by a Fake Out. Go straight for a Max Geyser, knocking out the Spectrier. So the Mud Shot into Grimnay was pretty fun, but doesn't actually get to do anything with that extra boost. Magnezone Volt switches out, doing a lot of damage to Scrafty. We see the Urshifu hit the field again. Suddenly Scrafty is low and burned. Goodra's Dynamaxed. Rain is up. Scrafty Dynamaxes while it's burned. That's interesting. I wonder what they're cooking with it. As Urshifu just goes straight for a Wicked Blow, it outspeeds the Sigilif, which again does not have its speed boost from the Adrenaline Orb anymore. Gravity will not be going back up, nor will there be a Dazzling Gleam coming out from Sigilif here, or a Flying Move into Urshifu. And all of a sudden, Max Geyser knocks out the Scrafty. We don't get to see what they were cooking by Dynamaxing low HP burn Scrafty. It just did not pay off for them. All of a sudden, one turn after I said that they've been under a lot of pressure so far, the Absols look like they've pretty well turned this thing around. They now have 3 Pokemon left, but it is Darkrai on the other side. Oh, it's 3% Darkrai. That's right, it took so much damage from those Electro Webs. The Absols were under a lot of pressure, but the Magnezone getting a couple of Electro Webs off and doing big damage with both of them has sort of more gradually worn down the targets on the other side. And now, after saving Urshifu for this late stage in the game, they're really capitalizing. If it's Scarf Urshifu, which same base speed as Sigilif, so unclear. If it's Scarf Urshifu, which I could see it being, then it can just Wicked Blow Darkrai and win. Otherwise, there's actually sort of an interesting dynamic here where you can Sucker Punch to knock out the Darkrai. But Darkrai probably most likely clicks Dark Void, and then of course Sucker Punch fails because it's not a damaging move. So you probably just have to Wicked Blow the Darkrai or Close Combat or whatever anyway, and hope that it misses some of its Dark Voids. But of course, there's no gravity up now, so Dark Void is just a 50-50 into every target. It is likely that the Absols win this easily from here. Did you switch Urshifu out actually to Magnezone? Dark Void misses both targets, and Darkrai drops to a Max Geyser. So Sigilif failing to get the gravity back up. Actually proving pretty significant there. It's still Darkrai still would have needed some luck to clutch up against all 3 of those opponents, and if it's Scarf Urshifu, it still just can't happen. But missing both Dark Voids there speeds things up a decent bit for sure. And you know, the Absols kind of bent but didn't break in this one. There was some pressure while the gravity was up and the tailwind, but they turned things around very quickly once those effects faded, and we'll see whether the cooler Dreamyard Darkrais have something else to throw at them that can properly break through now in Game 2. And we'll see whether Double ever hits the field. It is Sableye Darkrai, or Sableye. They always get me when they include a name like this in the nickname. Sigilif Darkrai lead, this time against Urshifu and Tapu Bulu. Oh, it wasn't Darkrai lead last time, it was Sigilif Scrafty. So, different leads on both sides now. Urshifu, Tapu Bulu on the other side. Scrafty does switch in here, intimidates both of these physical attackers. Darkrai Dynamaxes turn 1, not going for Dark Void. Wicked Blow into Sigilif, hits Scrafty instead and doesn't do very much, and we see that it has a Rocky Helmet. Darkrai goes for Max Knuckle off of Focus Blast, presumably, into Urshifu. Knocks it down to 1%, very narrowly misses the KO, and gives Scrafty an attack boost. That is an interesting idea. I do sort of wonder how well it's going to turn out for them. Scrafty is not the most threatening attacker out there, but I mean, and Darkrai did a lot of damage just with the Knuckle. I believe Darkrai gets Sludge Bomb, right? So it could go for Max Ooze into Tapu Bulu as well. The Darkrai boosting the Scrafty, at least for now, could be an offensive threat under Dynamax as well. I don't know if Max Ooze would do the trick now, though, because we do see the Tapu Bulu Dynamax. It avoids being flinched by a Fake Out. Wicked Blow doesn't do much to Darkrai. It's Max Lightning now off into Urshifu. That'll change the terrain. The Darkrai really showing that it doesn't care about the Dark Void as it actually sets up one of the 2 terrains that prevent sleep, getting rid of the opponent's grassy terrain. Tapu Bulu promptly sets up the other one with a Max Starfall, knocking out Scrafty, so we won't see Scrafty take much advantage of the attack boost. Dubwool is here, as is Sigilif. Max Knuckle into Dubwool doesn't KO. For those who didn't play Sword and Shield, the 2 types of max moves that boost attacking stats, Fighting for physical attack and Poison for special attack, have lower base power on their max moves to compensate. Max Knuckle, base power of max moves is a little bit flexible depending on what the underlying move is, but Max Knuckle generally has lower base power than other max moves, except the Poison 1 Max Ooze, which also has the same thing going on. So, Max Knuckle, off of presumably Focus Blast, fun tech to cover some of the threats on this team, but it does have that downside that the base power is a little bit lower. And of course, Max Airstream is super broken because it boosts speed, and they didn't adjust its base power downward. But anyway, that's what Darkrai is doing here with the last turn of its Dynamax. Hard to see the attack boost being useful to either of these Pokemon, and the Dubwool does survive, although it takes a lot of damage. Air Slash into Tapu Bulu chips it a bit. Of course, cannot flinch it while it's Dynamaxed. Dubwool goes for Cotton Guard, going +3 defense right away. A little bit hard to see the value of that in this position too, but we'll see what they're cooking. As Tapu Bulu goes for Max Overgrowth into Darkrai, changing the terrain back to grassy. So Dubwool will get some healing from that. Kind of looks like it's going for a bulky setup thing, but against special attackers, I don't know. Darkrai protects. We see Gravity. We see Body Press into Darkrai. So Dubwool is cooking that. Tapu Bulu. Okay, that's kind of clever. They set up the grassy terrain. Right, they clicked, even though Darkrai is weak to Fairy, they clicked Grass Move into it, I think probably in order to... I don't think there's any switch they'd be reading with that, so probably in order to set up the grassy terrain so that Dubwool would be able to get some recovery. But then on the last turn of their Dynamax, they put the Misty Terrain back up, and that does 2 things. One, of course, it prevents Darkrai from putting anything to sleep now that Gravity is up, because Misty Terrain blocks status, but also... And maybe this is what they were interested in more than a little bit of recovery on Dubwool, but it all ties together and complements each other. By flipping to grassy terrain and then back to misty terrain, they end their Dynamax with the most possible misty terrain turns remaining. So it'll be hard for the cooler Dreamyard Darkrais to stall it out. That's a pretty cool play there. Focus Blast connects into Dubwool, knocks it out. Never mind that grassy terrain recovery, but yeah, there is no Dark Void to worry about. That said, Focus Blast, of course, will also get its accuracy boosted by the gravity, so Darkrai does take advantage of it in that way. Darkrai also survives a -1 Wood Hammer from Tapu Bulu. I guess the one downside to not getting more damage into Darkrai before this point, when they had a couple of opportunities to do that. Both Pokemon faint on the... I got thrown by the coach there, the Absols side. And we see that Goodra is their last one. It's at full HP, but it does have 3 opponents to contend with. That said, Darkrai is low. Sigilif is at half. Focus Blast hits Goodra, does not do very much damage. Ice Beam does a bit more, but this has got to be Assault Vest Goodra, right? As we see a Dragon Pulse knock out the Darkrai. Spectre comes in at full, though. There's a lot of offense coming out from the cooler Dreamyard Darkrais. Goodra does survive an Ice Beam and a Shadow Ball. Dragon Pulse doesn't do a whole lot back to Sableye. Goodra just not strong enough to pull this one back. So, as much as I enjoyed the terrain shenanigans from the Tapu Bulu, in the end, the Absols just ran out of offense too quickly, while the cooler Dreamyard Darkrai still had a lot of it, this time saving the Spectre for the end of the game. This was a weird game all around, but yeah, some really interesting plays on both sides. The Darkrai taking advantage of the gravity with more than just the Dark Void, but also the Focus Blast was pretty helpful to it. I don't know if there's much more to say about this one. The cooler Dreamyard... The Absols have a well-rounded team, but the cooler Dreamyard Darkrais definitely have the sort of sharper, scarier offense, and it showed in Game 2, but let's see if the Absols... Wait, there's got to be a Game 3, right? Hang on. Technical difficulties, I guess. Sorry about that. Game 3 was hidden under a spoiler tag in the Discord, and I missed that when I was setting these up. But now it's time. We'll actually find out who wins this set. Absol leading with Scrafty for the cooler Dreamyard Darkrais. We'll see Absol's season debut here against the team for whom it's the mascot. Urshifu and Magnezone on the other side. Urshifu gets intimidated turn 1. Will it switch out right away again, especially with both of these resisting Wicked Blow? No, it doesn't. As we see Absol Dynamax, that means nobody switched. I believe Absol gets Play Rough. Fake Out will flinch the Urshifu. And yeah, Max Starfall will KO the Urshifu, so we won't see that Pokemon do a whole lot this turn. The cooler Dreamyard Darkrais, of course, have now set up the Misty Terrain themselves. Electro Web still doing a lot of damage, quite a bit to the Absol, even through its Dynamax, and of course lowering speed. As we see the Double come in again, Cotton Guard Double actually could go kind of crazy. These are both weak to Body Press, and they're both physical attackers. Cotton Guard getting the double to +3 defense immediately could make a big difference here. Max Starfall goes into the Magnezone. I'm not sure why. Maybe Play Rough is the only attack they have on the Absol, or maybe they thought Goodra would switch in. I don't know. But it actually crits, but still doesn't do a whole lot into the Steel type there. And Magnezone showing it's not running a choice item as it actually switches moves and lands a Thunderbolt into Absol, knocking it out. So Magnezone, I guess, is just a strong attacker that hits really hard, which is something I knew about it already. It could have Analytic, actually. I believe it does get that ability. But yeah, whatever it has boosting it under the surface, just hitting very hard and knocking out the Absol after not taking too much even from a crit. Max Starfall. But it will be knocked out back by close combat from Scraggy. That said, Scraggy, of course, weakening its defenses against the double. We see Darkrai here, so that's now 3 different body press weaknesses brought by the cooler Dreamyard Darkrais as they bring all 3 of their dark types to this game. We see Goodra come in for the Absols. Darkrai should be faster than the double, but of course Misty Terrain is still up. In fact, the cooler Dreamyard Darkrais set it up themselves. So Dark Void into double is not a threat here. Focus Blast is, but we know that double takes one. But then there is close combat from the Scrafty, so they might be able to overwhelm the double here. Goodra will Dynamax though, as Darkrai actually just protects this turn. Double goes for another Cotton Guard, goes straight to +6 defense. Cotton Guard. You don't see it often, it's not widely distributed, and defense boosts are only so valuable on most Pokemon, but being able to get to +6 defense in 2 turns is pretty strong. Goodra backs Geyser, narrowly misses the KO into Scrafty. That Pokemon will stick around a little bit longer, hit back with an Ice Punch for some decent damage. Darkrai just switches out this turn. We see Spectre switch in, so there is a Body Press immunity, and they might well be reading a Body Press into that slot. I think that would be reasonable here, and the Spectre also should outspeed double, although we'll see what it has to threaten it. Max Flutterby from the Goodra off of what? Infestation? I can't think of another move that Goodra gets in this game. Another bug move. Probably off of Infestation, if I have to guess. Not only finishes off the Scrafty, but also gets a special attack drop on the Spectre. That is a good use of Max Move secondary effects there. There are a lot of interesting uses of those in this set. Scrafty is knocked out. Spectre is weakened. Darkrai is back. It is the last turn of Misty Terrain, and they'll just protect with both Pokemon here. Darkrai avoiding a Body Press. It will get a shot at the Dark Void now. But another Max Flutterby from Goodra. Doesn't do much to Darkrai through Protect, but it does get another special defense drop, not only on Darkrai, but also on Spectre. So -1, -2 now. Dynamax is over for the Absols. Spectre Nasty Plot wipes out the Flutterby drops, but that's all it does. It doesn't boost it anymore as Darkrai, unfortunately for it, misses Body Press into misses Dark Void into both targets once again for the second time in this set, and +6 Body Press. I'm sure handily knocks it out even through that Choppleberry. Now Spectre is alone. It takes more than half from a Dragon Pulse, and we know that Shadow Ball without any boost is not going to do a whole lot back to the Goodra. Double shows Grassy Glide, so it has a way to damage Spectre, though it really doesn't do very much. And Goodra KOs with Dragon Pulse. And so, what is there to say about this game? The cooler Dreamyard Darkrais were honestly nerfed a little bit by setting up the Misty Terrain themselves, although Max Starfall wiping out the Urshifu turn 1 was probably pretty valuable for them. But they did stall out their own terrain, and in the end, Darkrai missing Dark Void into both targets was the bigger problem. And I mean, this is the risk of leaning on Darkrai, right? They didn't always have Gravity up in this set when they needed it. They didn't even bring Sigil after Game 3. And they had 2 different instances across the set where they clicked Dark Void into 2 targets and missed both of them. And then from there, in this one, the Max Flutterby Goodra closed things out pretty nicely. As Spectre Nasty Plot was unable to boost the Pokemon, all it could do was wipe out the drops that Goodra had gotten into it, and the Spectre just didn't hit hard enough to overwhelm the Goodra with the Dark Voids missing. Double also was very cool here in Game 3, playing a significant part, threatening most of the Pokemon that the cooler Dreamyard Darkrais had brought, so... and then the Magnezone taking down their Dynamax user, of course, also helped to make this this duo here unbreakable in the end game. So solid effort all around for both sides, but the Alaskan Absols in the end do find the right adjustments and bring this one home. Now we have this one that I accidentally showed earlier. It's the Edmonton Empoleons taking on the Elegancy. The Elegancy, also with a very Trick Room-oriented team, have brought some of the usual threats like Hatterene and Alolan Exeggutor, which both can set Trick Room and attack under it. Oranguru, which famously doesn't do any damage, but does set Trick Room, and Escavalier, which doesn't set Trick Room, but does a lot of damage when it's up. They have the Liepard to be a disruptive force, and maybe even use copycat Trick Room strats for a slightly safer way to set up Trick Room in some circumstances, and they have the Nidoking, which gives them a strong special attacker that doesn't rely on Trick Room. All things we've seen from this team before throughout the season. On the Empoleons side, they do have that Steelix, which I could see being very threatening into this team. It is weak to like Exeggutor Flamethrower, Nidoking Earth Power, but in a Trick Room situation, Steelix is very slow, but more importantly, very bulky. Hatterene does get Mystical Fire this generation, but Steelix could definitely threaten Hatterene if Trick Room is up and just be tanky and hard for Escavalier to break, although I know now from Week 3, from losing to this team in Week 3, that Escavalier does get Razor Shell, but still Steelix is just so very physically bulky. I could see it potentially shutting down a Trick Room mode depending on some of the details, what the other Pokemon are up to. Kingler is interesting here. I mean, it's strong physical water stab is just very threatening into a lot of the other side. We have the Riolu and Crocodile, so coaching is an option not only into Crocodile but also any of these other physical threats: Darmanitan, Kingler, Steelix. We have the Togekiss offering some redirection support, and Togekiss is also interesting because they could be running Serene Grace with Air Slash to flinch the slow Pokemon outside of Trick Room. They also could be running, Dazzling Gleam to threaten things like Exeggutor. But once again, I think this is probably a matchup between Trick Room and offense that wants to overwhelm the Trick Room before the Trick Room can go up. But the Empoleons also have some tanky Pokemon, Steelix in particular, but also some others that can probably get through Trick Room if it goes up, depending on the specific sets and positioning. Nidoking leading with Oranguru against Kingler and Riolu. Are we going to see the coaching immediately? Nidoking just switches out for Exeggutor. Exeggutor, of course, one of their bigger threats into Kingler. Okay. We see coaching and we see Swords Dance, so Kingler goes to +3 attack immediately and +1 defense, but there is no damage done into the Elegancy this turn, and they leave Oranguru open to potentially set Trick Room. I think Exeggutor is slower than Kingler. Yeah, so some very threatening boosts immediately, but I do kind of wonder whether coaching and an attack knockoff, maybe if Kingler gets that or something, might have been better here. Although I guess if you can't one-shot the Oranguru, I don't know how much difference it makes. And maybe Kingler will Dynamax next turn anyway. Probably just regular Dynamax. I don't know that the G-Max Kingler is all that valuable into a Trick Room team, but my point is maybe Kingler can overcome this Exeggutor anyway. So Kingler is very boosted. I do wonder whether they'll be punished for not doing any damage this turn, but I'm not sure how much it really matters. They might well have made the right call. We see, actually, despite everything I just said, no Trick Room goes up. We actually see Oranguru click Psychic into Riolu, doing a bit more than half. Kingler does Gigantamax. It is not Dynamax Kingler. I thought the advantage of Dynamax Kingler might be that you probably don't need the speed drops from the G-Max move in this matchup, and instead the power boost that you get on your water attacks from setting up the rain with Max Geyser might be more valuable, but that is not what we see here. It is G-Max Kingler. Alolan Exeggutor Dynamaxes. We see Screech from Riolu immediately dropping the Exeggutor to -2 defense, and Trick Room is not up. I think if there's an Ice-type attack, does Kingler get a physical Ice-type attack? It might get like Avalanche or something. And if there's something like that coming out of this Exeggutor, then the Elegancy's Dynamax might just be gone practically as soon as it began. It is instead Max Knuckle, and that's crazy. What did I say about the power of the fighting and poison type max moves being nerfed? +3 Max Knuckle into -2 defense Misses the KO. It does 90%. Kingler gets another boost. Riolu gets a boost now as well. It might actually be able to do something with that. But Exeggutor will get a chance to move. It also gets to eat its Citrus Berry. It's max Overgrowth into Kingler. It doesn't KO either. But the Trick Room now does go up. And they have Exeggutor still Dynamaxed under Trick Room. Ally switch from Oranguru. Ally switch from Riolu. Oh, Riolu goes for Copy. Oh, okay, I see what happened there. Riolu goes for Copycat, trying to reverse the Trick Room. Hang on, let's finish this turn. Okay, Riolu goes for Copycat, trying to reverse the Trick Room. Copycat uses whatever move was used most recently. So it can take advantage of Trick Room having the lowest priority in the whole game. That was their plan to get rid of the Trick Room if it went up. The problem is Oranguru clicks a priority move first. I don't know the exact priority of Ally Switch, but I believe it is higher than +1, which is what Prankster gives to moves like Copycat and Coaching. So instead of copying Trick Room, Riolu copies Ally Switch. That is very funny. It then means that Exeggutor's max Overgrowth... Exeggutor does get to move next because the Trick Room was not reversed, but max Overgrowth goes into Riolu instead of Kingler. That gives Kingler an opening to attack, but Kingler targeted presumably the Exeggutor slot, so that now goes into Oranguru. Oranguru is not KO'd by +4 Max Knuckle. Max Knuckle stocks are just absolutely plummeting this week. Very funny turn all around. Exeggutor harvests this berry and gets to eat it again, but while the Ally Switch was disruptive to both sides, Riolu failing to reverse the Trick Room definitely means that the Elegancy have the advantage in the position here, as far as I can tell. We do see Togekiss come in, though, so it can click Follow Me, and it does. The Exeggutor goes for Max Steel Spike. Maybe it gets Iron Tail? I can see Alolan Exeggutor getting Iron Tail. It has a tail. I can't think of what else that could be off of. But if it's a physical attack, then that is going to be weaker than the special attacks you usually see from Alolan Exeggutor. But I'm pretty sure it doesn't get Flash Cannon or, like, Mirror Shot or something. My best guess is Iron Tail. I don't know, people are getting really creative with the max moves this season, which is a lot of fun to see. In any case, it has a way to do some decent damage to Togekiss, but it doesn't KO. That'll create an opening for... Yeah, Psychic from Oranguru doesn't KO either. For Kingler to go for one more Max Knuckle. This one finally gets a KO, and it gets Kingler to +6 attack. And the Trick Room turns are ticking down as well, but now Hatterene comes in. This will probably go for Dazzling Gleam, so the Follow Me won't protect the Kingler. Sure enough, Kingler's Gigantamax is also over. Dazzling Gleam takes 2 KOs. Oranguru instructs for good measure, but there's no need this turn. And after all that work to take down the Exeggutor, and the Kingler boosting all the way up to +6 attack, which is pretty exciting stuff, Trick Room's still up. The Hatterene just gets in and flips the script on them immediately. Hatterene now going for Magic Powder to turn Steelix into a Psychic type. I don't know why. Maybe the Oranguru was about to click Shadow Ball. It narrowly survives a crunch from Steelix. Oh, there was an Ally Switch. Missed that. So the crunch was supposed to go into Hatterene? Or they just read the Ally Switch? I mean, if Steelix has a Steel move, you should be clicking that into Hatterene. So maybe they called the Ally Switch there. That actually would make a lot of sense to me, considering how the Oranguru was played up to this point. Doesn't matter, though. It does narrowly survive. Actually, thanks to the Max Steel Spike boost from the partner Exeggutor, Max moves are just going crazy this week. You'll love to see it. And here's an Instruct, but that'll make Hatterene use Magic Powder again, because that's the most recent move it used. I don't know what's going on in this game anymore, okay? They made their Hatterene use Magic Powder a second time for some reason. Steelix Crunch knocks out the Oranguru. Hatterene goes for Dazzling Gleam. It crits the Steelix, and I guess that was the point of the Magic Powder. They probably don't have Mystical Fire on this Hatterene, so instead they just turned off Steelix's Fairy Resistance. Fair enough, that's a valuable enough reason to use it. But even if that hadn't worked out, and I think Steelix probably takes that without the crit, they have Nidoking in the back, so it's GG for Steelix anyway. Yeah, never thought I'd see Magic Powder targeted into the same Pokemon twice in a row. That was just game 1, and I'm already lost, but let's see what happens in game 2 now. Escavalier leads with Liepard. Okay, so no Trick Room on the field immediately. It's Riolu and Kingler on the other side. Kingler actually should have a good opportunity to get boosted up here. Kingler actually Dynamaxes it, goes for Max Guard turn 1. And then we see Liepard taunt the Riolu. So Riolu went for Coaching, unsurprisingly. Does not get a chance to execute the move because of the taunt. I'm not sure why Kingler went for max guard in this position. I don't know what it's afraid of. Maybe like trick and eject button, but then you wouldn't use your Dynamax if you're afraid of that, right? It feels like this is way too passive. Like Kingler would have been better off clicking Swords Dance or just Dynamaxing and attacking something, but the Empoleons just don't accomplish anything this turn as Escavalier sets up a Swords Dance. The one silver lining is, again, there's no Trick Room up. Escavalier Dynamax is here. U-turn into Kingler doesn't do too much. Now Exeggutor comes in. Exeggutor should take that Max Knuckle really well. We have seen Max Knuckle do some unimpressive damage so far. It does get Kingler to +1 now. Max Knuckle back from the Escavalier. That does some pretty good damage, actually. Escavalier being a very hard-hitting Pokemon. Riolu goes for Circle Throw. What is going on in this game? Riolu goes for Circle Throw. Circle Throw works like Dragon Tail. It forces the target to switch out. However, just like we saw with the red card earlier, you can't force a Dynamax Pokemon to switch out that easily. I actually didn't remember these interactions before this week, before starting this very video, but and of course if you trick an eject button onto a Dynamax Pokemon, famously that does force it out. But I guess it probably works that way because the eject button is treated as the Pokemon's own effect that it's using on itself. But an opposing effect, like a Circle Throw or red card we see here, again, doesn't switch it out. But it's a good thing we have red cards on the brain because the Escavalier has one, so the Riolu tries to force the Escavalier out, but instead is forced out itself. That's so funny. Crocodile comes in, shows Intimidate, but Escavalier is still at +2 attack after that. We do see Crocodile miss a Skitter Smack into Exeggutor. That's pretty unfortunate. We see G-Max Foam Burst, a name that I've avoided saying up to now because I didn't remember it. Landing into the Escavalier, doing more respectable damage than the Knuckle has been doing. But it's still only about half, and I don't think the Elegancy care about speed drops. In fact, they might even benefit from them in the late game, depending on what the last Pokemon is for the Empoleons. And there's no rain to boost Kingler's damage further after this. Max Knuckle KOs the Crocodile. That was +2, and Escavalier, I guess, is stronger than Kingler. We see Togekiss come in now. So no Steelix this game. So the speed drops probably just don't matter at all. Exeggutor does set Trick Room, though, so the speed drops, just these Pokemon being slow is about to matter quite a lot. Togekiss uses Follow Me. It takes a Max Steel Spike thanks to a Focus Sash, but is knocked out by the follow-up with Wood Hammer. That would seem to confirm physical lull at Exeggutor here. I actually don't know if it gets Iron Head or Iron Tail, or maybe if it's Iron Head or something, but the Steel move it has must be one of those. Anyway, more than enough to knock out the Togekiss. As Crabhammer back, does not KO the Escavalier. I cannot tell what HP the Escavalier is at. 14%. Okay. But Trick Room is up. That should be enough for it to do a bunch more damage before fainting. Oh, Riolu uses Copycat. I assume you... Yeah, I've used Copycat before. You don't get to choose your target with that. So Riolu would probably rather have copied a Crabhammer into Escavalier, but instead... Random targeting gives it Exeggutor. That's not doing much damage. Kingler drops to a +3 X Scissor. Riolu drops to a +1 Woodhammer. The physical Exeggutor was pretty creative this week. It worked out pretty nicely for even though its raw damage is reduced. It worked out pretty nicely for the Elegancy here, and that plus Escavalier just being a giant menace. And believe me, I know. After I played this team earlier in the season, that brings this one home for them. The Kingler game plans were pretty good. I feel like they could have been executed a little differently and maybe at least gotten some closer games, but I don't know. This is a wild set. Let's just move on to the next one. We've got the Ontario Oguris taking on the Windsor Whiscash. The Oguris bring no Pelipper this week. That's interesting. Otherwise, a pretty familiar group. They do have the duo of Raichu and Pincurchin. They do have the Rapid Striker Shifu. They do have the bulky duo of Jellicent and Heatran, able to shut down some positions. They have Crobat. Crobat is very fast, and I think it gets Rain Dance. Raichu also is very fast, and I think it gets Rain Dance, so they do have Rain options potentially without the Pelipper, but we'll see what they're actually going for. And they are up against the Gastrodon team. Gastrodon and Pikachu and Circuitry. Maybe Pelipper was just too exposed in this matchup. That actually makes a lot of sense to me. They still have Jellicent to check the Blaziken. They have Raichu to go fast, outspeed everything. On the Whiscash side, Actually, it is a really interesting matchup for the Oguris because their biggest threats are water and electric type. And they are facing... I mean, I had the same issue, right, with Blastoise and Regieleki in Week 1 against the team with Gastrodon, which redirects and absorbs and is boosted by water attacks, and Pikachu, which redirects and absorbs and is boosted by electric attacks. So it will be really interesting to see what they've cooked up to deal with those two Pokemon. It's definitely a playable matchup for them. It's not like they auto-lose or anything, but it is kind of weirdly tricky. And that's at least a couple times now this season that the Whiscash have presented that team-building problem for an opponent. But also, when I played them, they didn't have Circuitry, and Circuitry looks like an absolute menace into Rapid Striker, Shifu, Jellicent. It could be Lightning Rod Pincurchin, actually, instead of Electric Surge. The Raichu doesn't need it to go faster than almost everything the Whiscash have, barring, of course, Speed Boost Blaziken after it sets up. I actually think Lightning Rod Pincurchin is totally plausible here to give them something to threaten the or something to make the circuitry less threatening into them. Otherwise, we got Galarian Moltres, which is vulnerable to Raichu, but maybe can play an interesting tanky game against some of the other Pokemon. We got Sableye with all kinds of support options. Blaziken could be fun to outspeed everything with Speed Boost and try to break the game open, but it really has trouble dealing with Jellicent and Urshifu, and even Crobat, so we'll see. But I'm actually going to call right now Lightning Rod Pincurchin, and we'll see if I'm right, and we'll see if it puts in some work. Crobat and Urshifu leading against Moltres and Sableye. Okay. Sableye, of course, could also have priority Will-O-Wisp into Urshifu, but the Oguris do switch it out, presumably to cover for that, and they switch Heatran in, so Heatran will get a Flash Fire boost now if Sableye did go for Will-O-Wisp. Moltres Dynamax is turn 1. It's actually flatter from the Sableye. So it gives Moltres a special attack boost, but also confuses it, and there's a Lumberry to wipe out the confusion. Okay. Lumberry is interesting because if Moltres gets paralyzed by Raichu, or burned by Jellicent, most likely paralyzed by Raichu, then the Lumberry will also cure that. So it's a trade-off in the builder between whether you want Persim Berry to guarantee that it specifically activates on the confusion and nothing else, or you want the extra flexibility of Lumberry to cover for some other things the opponent could throw at you. I think the Lumberry makes perfect sense here. You're not going to run the flatter stuff every single time. It's good to have that bit of flexibility. Max Airstream goes into Heatran. That was originally Urshifu, of course. Doesn't do much damage, but they do get the speed boost. Heatran Dynamax is next. Sableye goes for Ally Switch. A lot of Ally Switch this week. People definitely rediscovering the magic of Gen 8 Ally Switch across the league. Crobat Brave Bird does a little bit more than half in a Sableye, though. And we see another red card. That is 3 red cards this week. That is not something that I saw coming. Ally Switch, yeah, I remember playing Gen 8 with Ally Switch working the way it did that. I'm not surprised that it popped off eventually. I don't know what all these red cards are doing this week. Don't ask me about that one, but that'll force Crobat out and Rapid Striker Shifu in as Heatran goes for Max Rockfall. That knocks out Sableye. So Sableye basically trading itself with the Ally Switch to keep Moltres healthy as Moltres goes for Max Darkness. That'll lower the special defense on Heatran and Urshifu, and of course Moltres is at +1 special attack. And it still has that Max Airstream to threaten Urshifu if it wants. I don't know what the Oguris have. Crobat. I don't think we've seen what else they have. Pikachu comes in here. Fake Out will flinch the Urshifu. Urshifu trying to, not switching out here, trying to do something, but that'll give Moltres an opening for a Max Airstream if it wants. It takes the Max Rockfall off of, I think, Ancient Power pretty well. Galarian Moltres especially bulky. Ancient Power not very strong. Obviously a lot stronger as a max move, but it is weaker than a max move off of a stronger attack would be. So all around, Moltres takes that pretty well. It doesn't even get knocked down to Berserk. Actually, I think the Sand Chip might knock it down to Berserk, and I don't think Berserk activates when that happens, so that's a little bit awkward for the Whiscash, potentially. Urshifu is gone. Didn't really get to do anything in this game. We do see the Pincurchin come in, and we don't see Electric Drain, so it is Lightning Rod Pincurchin. Let's see what that can do about this Pikachu. Well, not yet, because Pikachu switches out to Blaziken. Moltres goes for Fiery Wrath. Oh, is it Safety Goggles, Moltres? Hang on, it didn't take sand damage, did it? No, it had a Lumberry. It did take sand damage. Okay, never mind. Max Quake. Heatran is... So Blaziken doesn't have any speed boosts up yet. The Oguris set Tailwind a few turns ago. So the Heatran is faster than the Blaziken, just wipes it out with a Max Quake. Pincurchin flinches. Pincurchin took some damage from that Fiery Wrath. Now Pikachu is back. Tailwind is over. Fake Out flinches Pincurchin. Fiery Wrath. This is the KO on Pincurchin, but it does KO Heatran, and Pincurchin flinches again. This one guaranteed by the Fake Out. And just like that, the Oguris are down to only Crobat. The Galarian Moltres might not have gotten its Berserk boost, but that Flatter boost is actually really coming in handy, along with the +2 speed from Max Airstream, as Moltres kind of sweeping so far. Fiery Wrath at +1, knocking out the Crobat, and just like that, the Ontario Oguris, I said it was a tricky matchup in sort of the same way it was for Regieleki and Blastoise in Week 1. They never got their footing this time. The Blaziken never showed up, or the Blaziken did, the Gastrodon didn't. The Pikachu didn't do a whole lot, although that one Fake Out was actually pretty important. And the Blaziken never got set up, so it just got one-shot by Heatran. But even with all that going against the Whiscash, the Galarian Moltres was able to Dynamax turn 1 and just sweep, and the Oguris, like I said, never got their footing to stand up to it or get their own offense going. Pretty rough game 1 for them. We'll see how they adjust in game 2. But yeah, I'm really impressed with the Galarian Moltres, and the Flatter attack actually paid off pretty nicely. Moltres, in this form, probably its biggest weakness. You know, it's a bulky Pokemon, it has pretty good stats. Probably its biggest weakness is that its special attack is just not that high. You can make up for it with Berserk and Nasty Plot, but just clicking Flatter into it, getting that extra bit of damage, and just firing away with max moves from turn 1 actually paid off pretty nicely for them as well. And then, of course, when the Dynamax... The Oguris never managed to knock out the Dynamax Moltres, fairly bulky Pokemon, and then when the Dynamax wore off, it had that spread Fiery Wrath at +2 speed to do damage to both targets and fish for flinches. And the Oguris didn't bring a Dark Resist. Actually, they did, it's Urshifu, but then that's weak to flying. So, strong game for Moltres all around. Let's see if it can keep that going in game 2. Heatran and Rapid Strike Urshifu against Pikachu and Gastrodon. So Gastrodon is here this time, and so is Pikachu. There will be no Surging Strikes here. Mostly because of Storm Drain, partly because of Storm Drain, but also because the Fake Out went into Urshifu once again. Heatran Dynamax is turn 1, Max Quakes into Pikachu, so that'll knock Pikachu out. That could create an opening for Raichu or maybe Pincurchin in the back. It does leave Heatran a bit vulnerable to Gastrodon, Dynamaxing turn 1 like that, but Gastrodon will probably be running special attacks, and so the Max Quake special defense boost is also helpful to Heatran, along with Gastrodon just not being that strong. Earth Power yeah, actually doesn't do that much to Heatran after the boost, but now Moltres is here. It's going to Dynamax again. Urshifu just goes straight for close combat. It crits. It does knock Moltres into Berserk range, so it gets the same kind of boost that it got from the Flatter last game. They get that Max Airstream, they wipe out the Urshifu. Urshifu really not very convincing so far this set, not getting a whole lot done. But the Heatran, well, okay, but the close combat crit actually does prove pretty valuable, as Heatran Max Rockfall then almost gets the KO. Moltres, so tanky, taking that one pretty well once again, but the sand damage should knock it out afterward. And the Gastrodon goes for Mud Slap. This Gastrodon's running Earth Power, it's also running Mud Slap. They see the Earth Power not doing a whole lot of damage into Dynamaxed +1 Heatran. They go for Mud Slap and lower its accuracy. Can't say I saw that one coming. Heatran does have one more turn of Dynamax, and max moves will not miss. But after that, its moves can miss. The Moltres does drop to the sand damage here. So they are going to need something else to be the win con here. They cannot rely on Moltres, but we didn't see Circuitry in Game 1. We do see it here in Game 2. Is Pincurchin in the back for the Oguris? We'll just have to find out. Thunderbolt wipes out Crobat with a crit that I would not bet mattered. There's a Beast Boost for Circuitry. Earth Power goes into Gastrodon, not into Circuitry, maybe anticipating a Protect on the last turn of Heatran's Dynamax. But they did kind of let that Crobat go down almost for free. Heatran does get another special defense boost. Takes another Earth Power pretty well, considering it's a Heatran, but it is under half now. Raichu is the last Pokemon for the Ontario Oguris. That makes sense. That was my guess with the way they were playing. The way they aggressively removed the Pikachu and let Urshifu go down early on, I thought maybe they have Raichu to do some more damage in the back. I was calling out Pincurchin as a possibility because that was their best answer to Circuitry. They didn't bring Pincurchin, they brought Raichu. Circuitry goes for Thunderbolt. Doesn't KO the +2 Heatran. Psychic from Raichu just misses the KO on Gastrodon, though. Heat Wave misses Gastrodon, otherwise would have KO'd. Heat Wave misses the KO in a different way, and it actually does do a lot to circuitry. Gastrodon Earth Power doesn't go into Heatran, it goes into Raichu, but it does a lot of damage. Raichu, significantly weakened. Circuitry gets to finish off the Heatran. Raichu finishes off the Gastrodon, of course, was unable... Of course, Gastrodon wouldn't still be there anymore if Heatran hadn't missed the Heat Wave last turn. So Raichu could have clicked Psychic into Circuitry, if not for that miss. But of course, if I'm going to talk about Heatran missing the Heat Wave and how important that is to the end of this game, we should remember it was at -1 accuracy thanks to Gastrodon Mud Slap. So Gastrodon, arguably the hero here for the Windsor Whiscash, as Raichu drops the sand damage. The Whiscash get their first win of the season, and the Ontario Oguris take their first loss of the season. We are down an undefeated team, and the Windsor Whiscash, like I said, it's a weird matchup, but I mean, they drafted in a way that creates weird matchups. That's a credit to them too. And the early season pickup of Circuitry has made their team a lot more threatening. The Moltres went crazy in Game 1, even when some of their attacks are not hitting. They found ways to get through it in this one, and the Oguris could just never find their footing in the matchup. And the Mud Slap on Gastrodon was also arguably pretty clutch, because I do think that was a game-saving Heat Wave miss there. Well, game-losing from the Ontario side. Now we have Staff United, the other undefeated team, taking on Lunala Plaza. Lunala Plaza... I don't see the I see the Carbink, but I don't see the Shedinja, so it's not an unkillable Shedinja game plan. I don't know what the game plan is. I mean, Noivern and Blacephalon is a strong duo with Tailwind, and Noivern having telepathy, so it doesn't take damage from his partner's Mind Blown. And then Didi, the Lapras, the Machamp. I know they're cooking something, but I don't know what it is, as is typical with this team. On the Staff United side, we see some of the usual threats. Weezing and Regigigas, of course, being a powerful duo with the neutralizing gas turning off slow start, and Regigigas being a strong Dynamax attacker. They have that powerful, fast Menace in Nihilego. They have their slower, tankier Ultra Beast and Buzzwole, although Buzzwole, I would imagine, has a hard time standing up to Blacephalon and Noivern, so I don't know if we'll actually see it come to a game. They have one of the fastest offensive threats in the league in Dragapult. Although a number of these Pokemon are kind of weak to Lapras, but then Lapras is just not that strong, and it is weak to Nihilego and Buzzwole. Regigigas can run coverage for it. They have the Meowstic running support as well. I could actually see like bulk up Buzzwole behind screens, but again, that kind of just loses to Blacephalon and Noivern, so probably don't bring that game one. Maybe feel their opponent out, try to figure out what the game plans are. I could see a Dragapult lead or a Nihilego lead in game one, but let's just jump in and find out. Machamp and Carbink against Nihilego and Dragapult. Alright, well, I could see a Nihilego lead or a Dragapult lead, and sure enough, I do see that. Dragapult Dynamax is turn 1. Is it going to be Max Airstream into this Gigantamax Machamp? Brutal Swing from Nihilego, so outspeeding Dragapult and presumably activating a weakness policy while not doing a whole lot of damage. There's the policy. I think Dragapult has higher base speed than Nihilego, so that says something. That's some good information, at least, about how these Pokemon are trained. Oh yeah, well, actually quite a bit higher. But both are fairly fast, but you know this is not a turbo-fast Dragapult because they wanted to underspeed the partner Nihilego, or Scarf Nihilego locking itself into Brutal Swing, but that doesn't seem as likely. We'll find out. Max Airstream, however, even at +2, misses the KO on Machamp. Does give them speed boost, but they're already way faster. G-Max Chi Strike does 99% to the Nihilego, knocking it down to an invisible Focus Sash and giving boosted crit rates to both of these Pokemon. What will the Carbink do with the boosted crit rate? I already spoiled. It says Trick Room. But then Body Press into Nihilego. No crit, but Nihilego's at 1% anyway. Max Hailstorm into Dragapult. Would have KO'd with a crit, doesn't get it. Machamp drops to its own Life Orb. But Dragapult went for Max Wormwind, maybe looking to lower the attack stat on the Machamp. But Machamp in Trick Room... it attacked last turn, so they have seen the Life Orb already. Maybe anticipating a switch, or maybe missing that Machamp would knock itself out there. They did go for Max Wormwind, that does nothing to Carbink. Don't know what happened there, but it's not optimal for Staff United. We see Meowstic and Lapras come in. Lapras switches out to Indeedee. So there shouldn't be a whole lot of damage left on the Lunala Plaza side. They don't have any super strong attackers now that Machamp has gone down. Really, Blacephalon is the only other one that they brought to this matchup, and they probably don't want to be playing that in Trick Room. They certainly haven't brought it to Game 1. So, a strong start for them, but we'll see if they can actually close this one out. But they do still have Carbink with the boosted crit rate. Dragapult just max guards here as Meowstic has the light screen, but Dragapult is getting worn down by the hail damage. It's a 2%. Trick Room's still up. Hail's still up. They switch out to Buzzwole. We actually do see the Buzzwole in Game 1. It has Room Service. Okay, so that's part of their counterplay to the Trick Room mode from Lunala Plaza. But Female and Deity gets Expanding Force in this generation. Buzzwole switches in and immediately takes 2/3 of its health to the Expanding Force. It could just hit back, though. Now that its speed is lowered, it could just hit back next turn with Leech Life. And if they let them get that into a Deity, that could heal Buzzwole up pretty nicely. Meowstic, we see the eject button on Meowstic. It gets crit and forced to switch out. Now Dragapult is here to drop the hail damage. Pretty unfortunate there for the Dragapult. But of course, Meowstic was the only other Pokemon they had in the back, so there was nobody they could switch in that didn't have an eject button. Now it's Meowstic and Buzzwole standing alone. We see Helping Hand from the Indeedee into the Carbink. Is it going to be Moonblast into Buzzwole? Buzzwole just protects, actually, on the last turn of Trick Room. No Leech Life into Indeedee. Meowstic goes for Expanding Force. It doesn't do much as Buzzwole avoids a Body Press. Another Expanding Force. Trick Room's over now, and Indeedee Expanding Force KOs Buzzwole. Carbink Body Press finally gets that crit that it's been that's pretty well earned at this point, and it KOs Meowstic. I feel like the Buzzwole, maybe, I mean, they might not have Leech Life, I don't know, but if they did have it, I feel like it had an opening to get some recovery against the Indeedee there, but it was probably still an uphill battle. I don't know. We never saw what the Lapras could do. But yeah, Carbink got that crit boost, and it came through in the end against the Meowstic. Lunala Plaza take Game 1. Can Staff United fight back and remain undefeated where other teams have failed? Let's see. Noivern and Blacephalon, kind of figured we'd see them after they didn't come to Game 1. Leading against another duo, the other duo we didn't see, Regigigas and Weezing. Of course, this mode doesn't really rely on its abilities, right? Blacephalon would like to get Beast Boost, but that has nothing to do with its initial damage turn 1. And Noivern has some decent abilities. I mean, I guess you're less inclined to click Mind Blown if Noivern doesn't have Telepathy online, but if Noivern is going for Tailwind, it just relies on its speed stat to set that up. It's not like it has Prankster or something. Blacephalon actually protects turn 1 as Regigigas Dynamaxes, Weezing protects, and Noivern sets Tailwind. Okay. Max Darkness into Blacephalon. That'll do actually a lot of damage through that protect, but the Tailwind is up. Blacephalon will be outspeeding the opponent's threats next turn. Indeedee switches in. There will be no Psychic Terrain, but also not really any need for it in this position, so it's okay for now. But of course, they can't click Follow Me on the same turn they switch in. Blacephalon's a little bit exposed. Blacephalon has Expanding Force. I did not remember that Pokemon learns that move. It does only hit one target because the Neutralizing Gas prevents the terrain, but it one-shots Weezing, and the terrain will go up now. That said, Blacephalon will probably get knocked out by Regigigas. Is he Psychic Seed on the Indeedee? Even with slow start, Blacephalon will probably get knocked out by Regigigas. No, Regigigas goes for Rock Slide into Indeedee, and with the slow start nerf, doesn't actually do all that much damage. It does set up a Sandstorm that will chip this Blacephalon down when it's already pretty weakened, but Blacephalon will get another chance to attack under this Tailwind. Nihilego comes in, but again, Tailwind is up for Lunala Plaza. Blacephalon probably doesn't have long to remain in this game, although actually Indeedee can follow me here. And if Blacephalon takes a KO, then Indeedee can prevent a hit from the other Pokemon, or maybe it can even just tank a hit with that Psychic Seed, boosting its special defense against Nihilego. Point is, you know Blacephalon's going to go first. You know it has at least one chance to get a big hit off here. It could even go for Max Flare into Regigigas and get rid of the Sand Chip. But no, it's Max Mindstorm into Nihilego. Doesn't quite KO, almost does. The Indeedee shows Heal Pulse. That'll get Blacephalon a little bit healthier as Nihilego goes for Brutal Swing. Nihilego, okay, so Brutal Swing is a spread move. It hits every target. I think Staff United, just like me, were anticipating the Follow Me there and went for Brutal Swing for something that would still hit Blacephalon and do significant damage, considering that Blacephalon was very weakened and is weak to the move. I think that works if Indeedee goes for Follow Me. So this would have turned out just as badly for me if I were in Staff United's position, because I thought a Follow Me was coming. But Indeedee just bravely giving a Heal Pulse to Blacephalon so it can stick around a little bit longer, and Blacephalon then gets through the Brutal Swing. That said, we haven't seen yet what Regigigas goes for. Max Darkness. But it's into Indeedee. It KOs, but somehow Blacephalon is still here. One more turn of Tailwind. At least I think that's what it says, hidden under this Regigigas. Noivern is back. It's Frisk Noivern, not Telepathy. We see Choice Scarf on the Nihilego. So it is Scarf Nihilego locked into Brutal Swing. Again, it makes sense because they want it to be faster than Dragapult, but there is a significant downside. It cannot switch moves now without switching out. And we know Brutal Swing doesn't do enough to this Blacephalon. Anyway, with Tailwind still up, Noivern goes first and knocks Nihilego out with the U-turn. We see Machamp switch in. Regigigas still in slow start territory and no longer Dynamaxed. Super vulnerable to this guy. But also just gets wiped out by Max Flare before Machamp gets to do anything. Blacephalon Beast boosts up to +2. Dragapult is the last Pokemon for Staff United. It will be faster than anything else here. We could be pretty sure of that since we saw that it was Scarf Nihilego, and that's why it was faster than Dragapult. Going for Fly, so it'll avoid the last Max move coming out from the Blacephalon here. Max Phantasm misses. It's like the only circumstance where that can happen. Machamp misses with Ice Punch. I actually think... Someone correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. I think that Ice Punch would have hit if Machamp had no guard. So I think it must not have no guard this week. Maybe it has Guts. I think that makes decent sense into Weezing, actually, running Guts, because that could poison you or run Will-O-Wisp. Or you could even face Thunderwave Meowstic. Someone correct me if I'm wrong about this interaction, but I do actually think that Ice Punch would have hit if Machamp had no guard. So, Staff United bailed out a little bit by that one, but I'm not sure it's going to matter. Fly misses Machamp. That confirms then it definitely doesn't have no guard, even if I'm wrong about the other interaction. No guard prevents moves from missing from or into the user, so that Fly would not have missed if they had it. But this game was over anyway because Dragapult just drops from Expanding Force. And Lunala Plaza taking a huge win here, as we see two undefeated teams back-to-back taking their first losses of the season, the Ontario Oguris in the last set. And now Staff United in this one, just with just giving too much room to the Blacephalon to absolutely sweep their team aside. A clash of two very powerful Ultra Beasts in Nihilego and Blacephalon. Buzzwole was here too. And Blacephalon is just given too much space to do what it does and comes out ahead. But yeah, the Machamp without no guard was kind of interesting as well. And the G-Max in Game 1, setting up the Carbink to get that last turn crit. Really interesting stuff from Lunala Plaza. Their team, there are some obvious synergies with their team, but they often have kind of a game plan hidden under the surface that I don't understand until I see it play out. It's fun to watch. Last set for the week, we have the Bashful Bisharps taking on the Dreamyard Darkrais. Tell me if you've heard this one before. They have the Arctozolt on the Bisharp side with Alolan Ninetales to set up the Hail, presumably activating Slush Rush, and with Tapu Koko to set up the Electric Terrain, boosting that Bolt Beak even more. Did I say Dracozolt? I probably did. I often do. Arctozolt looking primed to go crazy into the Rain team that the Darkrais have here. And then they have some strong threats in Terrakion, Scizor, and Slowking. I feel like we see the same 6 Pokemon pretty often with this team. On the Darkrais side, I mean, we do have a Weather War here, right? Because as much as the Hail is valuable to Arctozolt, the Politoed can get rid of it with Drizzle. That said, Politoed being not especially fast and weak to Bolt Beak makes it pretty vulnerable. So could take some tricky positioning for the Darkrais to actually get the advantage in this one. And to get their Dreadnought going with Swift Swim and not also dropping into that Bolt Beak. They do have some partners to help it out, though. Hawlucha and Male Indeedee should be pretty valuable here because it gives them another way to get a super fast Pokemon that probably outspeeds the Arctozolt and then threatens it with that super effective fighting type damage if they have Unburdened Psychic Seed Hawlucha with Indeedee. And while we do have a Weather War, actually we do have a Terrain War as well, right? The Tapu Koko can try to take the terrain away, but the terrain advantage definitely belongs to the Darkrais here because Indeedee is slower than Tapu Koko. If they both lead, it gets its terrain up immediately, and it only needs to get its terrain up for a moment to activate the Psychic Seed on Hawlucha, and I'd say that's the main thing the Psychic Terrain is valuable for here, just getting Hawlucha turbo fast. So if they just get the Psychic Terrain up ever with Hawlucha on the field, then they have that as long as it remains on the field, and that should be pretty easily done. So I would say A lot of interesting weather and terrain interactions in this matchup. I would give the weather advantage to the Bisharps and the terrain advantage to the Darkrais. And the Hawlucha should be super strong here because even if the Bisharps get their weather control, Arctozolt is still pretty threatened by Hawlucha. That said, if it's like Scarf Arctozolt, Hawlucha is weak to the Bolt Beak. There are definitely ways that they could have built to overcome that bit of tricky matchup there. And we've already been pretty overwhelmed by Max Knuckle multiple times in this video, so with Arctozolt being a favorite Dynamax target of the Bisharps, even if Hawlucha Dynamaxes to keep up, it could be still tricky for them to deal with. And then, yeah, in terms of the Weather War, Arctozolt is just so threatening into Politoed and Dreadnought that they might be leaning pretty heavily on the Hawlucha. We'll see. I haven't talked about Azelf. Azelf is just a solid, strong attacker. Gives them, well, a lot of their team is good answers into Terrakion. Azelf can run coverage for things like Scizor and Slowking as well. Zoroark. Well, given that I'm talking up the Bisharps as having a relatively good matchup here, like I said, I do think the terrain matchup favors the Darkrais, but I think the Bisharps probably have tools, certainly can have tools to overcome that. Zoroark Mind Games might be the key to the Darkrais. I don't know what it's going to do, but it might be the key to them turning around what I do think is ultimately actually a pretty tough matchup for them. But enough of that, let's see what happens. Tapu Koko 2 leads with Arctozolt against Dreadnought and Azelf. We know that it's the real Tapu Koko because Electric Surge does activate. Oh, sorry, what am I saying? The Darkrai is on the other side. It's the last set for this week. My brain is short-circuiting, thinking about magic powders and red cards. Obviously, it's the real Tapu Koko. That's not the side that has a Darkrai. Who knows what's going on the other side? With the terrain up, Ninetales now switches in. Ninetales probably not leading here, just to cover for the Politoed lead. We don't see a Politoed lead. Dreadnought Gigantamaxes. Arctozolt does not Dynamax, it just goes straight for Bolt Beak into Azelf, and there is the Zoroark. It's just one shot, no Focus Sash on it or anything, but Arctozolt leaves itself open to a G-Max Stone Surge, and for all that I've talked up the Arctozolt is a giant threat in this matchup, which it certainly is. It gets one shot turn 1 in game 1. With the Darkrais also setting up Stealth Rock, and now they get Politoed in, they get their weather control. Tapu Koko is here, but they activate Swift Swim on the Dreadnought. Tapu Koko Dynamaxes, but a G-Max Stone Surge is going to hurt. Ninetales protects, it is the Stone Surge into Tapu Koko. It doesn't quite KO as Max Lightning knocks out the Dreadnought. But Tapu Koko drops to its own Life Orb, so Dreadnought took out Arctozolt and then traded itself for Tapu Koko. Probably have to feel pretty good about that if you're the Dreamyard Darkrais. You also have weather control for probably the rest of the game. As Scizor is the last Pokemon for the Bisharps. The real Azelf, of course, is the last one for the Darkrais. Politoed Helping Hand into Azelf Flamethrower. Doesn't matter that it's raining. That is plenty to knock out the Scizor. Ninetales is all alone. It fires a Moonblast into Politoed. Doesn't do much damage. It doesn't even get a special attack drop, although Politoed is focused on Helping Hand for Azelf here anyway. Azelf goes for another Flamethrower to Ninetales. Without rain, that would have KO'd, but with, it's very close, and this Moonblast drop will not matter as Azelf closes this out with a Flamethrower crit that also doesn't matter. So, for all that I talked up, what looked like a favorable matchup for the Bashful Bisharps, the Dreamyard Darkrais take game 1 with Dreadnought going crazy in the early game and doing just enough work for the strong offensive threat that is Azelf to close this one out. Let's see what adjustments the Bisharps find in game 2. Tapu Koko leads with Arctozolt once again against Indeedee and Hawlucha this time. So again, Hawlucha should have the speed advantage. Psychic Terrain is up. It is Psychic Seed Hawlucha, but I mean, I would be shocked if it weren't. Ninetales switches in, sets up the Hail. Hawlucha Dynamaxes immediately. And Hawlucha is slower than Arctozolt. Hawlucha's base speed is quite a bit higher. My guess is that they expected the Hawlucha to be faster there, and maybe it is that Choice Scarf Arctozolt that I was speculating about at Team Preview. It's good information for the Darkrais, but it's bad news for them in this game, as Hawlucha just gets one shot immediately on using their Dynamax. Indeedee Expanding Force hits pretty hard, but doesn't knock anything out. Scarf, I've been had. Noe is just running fast. Is Slush Rush a bigger boost than Unburden? I don't think it is. I think they're the same boost, are they not? Maybe we'll get more insight on what happened here. But for now, Arctozolt will get another chance to land a big hit into something. Indeedee protects. And it is the Bolt Beak target. Slush Rush is times 1,000. Okay, I stand corrected. Arctozolt actually does not get any more damage off. I'm not sure why they targeted Indeedee there. Maybe because it's a spread attacker and Azelf probably isn't. Azelf has Levitate, so it has to run an Iron Ball to get the terrain benefit from Expanding Force. My gut just kind of felt like the Azelf was more threatening, but I guess I can understand targeting the Indeedee because it has that big spread damage. But even then, you can take that away with Tapu Koko. Anyway, Ninetales sets up an Aurora Veil. Tapu Koko does come in and change the terrain. Eyes peeled for more updates in the chat. Politoed changes the weather. Tapu Koko throws off a Dazzling Gleam. Decent chip damage into Azelf. A little bit into Politoed. The rain, of course, does weaken that Flamethrower, so Tapu Koko takes that pretty well. Ninetales Blizzard takes out the Azelf, hitting both targets despite Hail no longer being up. Indeedee is back to get some terrain control now. Volt Switch doesn't knock out the Politoed because it has a Wakan Berry. Now Terrakion comes in. That thing's not going to enjoy an Expanding Force. Ninetales Moonblast crits Indeedee, but Indeedee survives, gets some recovery with the Citrus Berry. Hits back hard into both targets with Expanding Force, but no KO. And it does look like to me like the Dreamyard Darkrais. Oh, they had 2 KOs there with Muddy Water, but they missed both targets. That's really unfortunate. If that doesn't happen, Tapu Koko comes in. It does change the terrain. And then what? It can knock out Politoed, but it has to take a hit from Indeedee. I don't know. This game is a lot closer if that Muddy Water connects, but I think the Darkrais are going to run out of gas now. Indeedee protects. Ninetales goes for Blizzard. This is a brave Ninetales, just continuing to click those Blizzards in rain. We know it's not specs or anything because of the Aurora Veil. Chips the Politoed a little bit. Terrakion closes out with a Rock Slide. And yeah, if Politoed had landed Muddy Water into both targets, it's a different endgame. Even one target, maybe it's a different endgame. But Ninetales and Terrakion get to just hang around and close this one out. That is really unlucky for the Dreamyard Darkrais. They came into a tricky matchup and almost swept their opponent aside and got robbed by Muddy Water accuracy at the end there. But we'll still go to Game 3 here. They still have a shot. Muddy Water might not be a real move. Maybe they should have done Clean Water. Let's see if Game 3 plays out a bit differently. Ninetales leads with Terrakion. No Arctozolt right off the bat this time. Interesting. Against Indeedee and Dreadnought, it is the real Indeedee. We see the Psychic Surge, so that confirms this isn't Zoroark. This still could be. Pushes out to Politoed. Sets up Drizzle, so that's probably the real Dreadnought. And sure enough, it Gigantamaxes. The Drizzle giving it Swift Swim. Tells me that's Dreadnought. Gmax Stone Surge knocks Ninetales down to a Focus Sash, and because Politoed switched in, the Aurora Veil will not work without Hail up. Also, Stealth Rock is on the field, so now Ninetales cannot switch out and back in without dropping to the Stealth Rock. So, the Darkrais making a statement immediately, grabbing Weather Control, but Terrakion Close Combat does a lot of damage back to Dreadnought. Doesn't KO, though. Tapu Koko switching in. Ninetales does switch out, so again, it'll be knocked out by Stealth Rock as soon as it comes back in. Gmax Stone Surge just wiping out the Terrakion. Tapu Koko taking Ice Beam reasonably well. Ninetales comes in, doesn't even get to change the weather before it drops the Stealth Rock damage. That's probably what they were trying to do, but it, as they say in the chat here, it don't work like that. And now Arctozolt comes in. It takes Stealth Rock damage. However crazy fast this Arctozolt is, it does not get its Hail to activate Slush Rush unless it clicks Max Hailstorm, which it might well do into this Dreadnought if it gets the chance. It does Dynamax. Dreadnought gets a helping hand, and Gmax Stone Surge knocks out Arctozolt. No opportunity to set the Hail back up. Tapu Koko does knock out Dreadnought, but once again, Dreadnought has hit very hard and I think done what it needed to do, and now Indeedee comes in. Thunderbolt into the Wakan Berry, not even a KO on Politoed, but helping hand into Indeedee, into Expanding Force. And whatever I thought about the matchup, the Dreamyard Darkrais really made a statement this week. They just did not let up the pressure. They would have taken this pretty smoothly in 2 games if not for that Muddy Water double miss, I think. I'm not sure how the endgame plays out in Game 2. It's at least a lot closer. But yeah, the Dreadnought went crazy in Games 1 and 3, and it's a well-deserved win by the Dreamyard Darkrais. We didn't get any more insight on the speed interaction between Hawlucha and Arctozolt. I believe both Unburden and Slush Rush give the same boost. But in any case, real shakeup, some real shakeups around the league here in Week 5 at the beginning of the second half of the season. A couple of winless teams getting their first wins, and hopefully by now you've watched Monday's video and you know what happened. From 3 undefeated teams down to 0. Everybody has at least one win. Everybody has at least one loss. Going to be a competitive season in these remaining 3 weeks. And then who knows what's going to happen in playoffs. But unless I learn something more about what happened in that speed interaction and I tack it onto the end of this video, that was Week 5, and it's on to the next one now. Okay, I think it just had to be Scarf Arctozolt. Also, Legends ZA will be out by the time this goes up. In fact, I think at time of recording, it's already out in some of the world. So that's exciting. I'm looking forward to it. Anyway, happy gaming with that. Bye.